Hello, welcome to the recap of the game between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri from Tata Steel in round 2. Last time that these two players played against each other was in the World Blitz, and Anish Giri won the game, and after that he winked at the camera. So I think it kind of motivated Magnus to show his best chess in this game, and after c4, e6, knight f3, d5, g3, he went for the Catalan, bishop e7, bishop g2, castles, and now Giri took on c4. And here white has a couple of options. The most logical ones are knight e5, after which black has options like knight c6, giving up the pawn. After bishop c6, bc, knight c6, and so on and so on. The absence of the light square bishop is somewhat compensating for this extra pawn. And also there is an option like c5 here to enter some kind of symmetrical position with the symmetrical structure, 2 versus 2 on the queen side, 4 versus 4 on the king side, but still white would have a slight edge because of this dominating bishop on g2 against the bishop on c8. Also, after dc4, there is queen c2, targeting c4, and black can push here b5, defending this pawn, and white can answer with a4, after which black has options like b4, bishop b7 as well, not c6 because of this, capturing a knight g5. And now there's no way to cover this rook, because knight e5 leads to a checkmate. So after b5, a4, there's only b4 and bishop b7. But let's not get too deep into that. After dc4, Magnus doesn't play any of these moves. He plays knight a3, being ready to recollect on c4. But also the bishop is currently hitting on the knight on a3, so Giri said, why not? Let's take on a3, b takes a3, and now white structure on the queen side is ruined. But black's pieces on the queen side are still lagging, and he still needs some time to develop. First, he wants to resolve the issue of his bishop from c8. He went bishop d7 first. He wants to go to c6 and to oppose this bishop on g2. Now Magnus plays a4. With a4, he's not allowing b5, but Giri plays bishop c6. Now his plan is very simple. He's going to play knight bd7, knight b6 even, and finish developing. Magnus went with bishop a3, rook e8, and now queen c2. He's hitting on the c4 pawn. In this position, bishop d5 would be maybe a loss of time, because after a move like rook fd1, knight d2 next maybe, or knight e5, he would eventually collect this pawn and still have some pressure along the b file and on the c file, of course. So white wants to eliminate this bishop, which is like a glue on black's queen side. Giri continues developing. He doesn't spend time to defend this pawn. Rook ac1 and now a6. He takes on c4, but now knight b6 is played, and Magnus goes back to c3. Also, queen c2 is possible here. In case of bishop a4, it's also possible to capture on c7, but also to keep tension with queen b2. Wanting to go knight e5 next, because now the d4 pawn is under protection. If bishop c6 happens, then there's also an option which we saw later in the game to capture on c6, bc, and knight e5, after which the position gets really complex. Even though white is an exchange down, his rooks are not deployed yet. They're not in the game, and let's say if black plays knight bd5, knight c6, queen d7, after rook c1, white is the one who is more pleasant, because the only open file in the position is covered by the knight hitting on b8, and the rooks cannot get to the fullest potential. And in this position, after queen c2, the best move probably is to capture with the knight on a4. And now still this bishop stays on c6. If white doesn't do anything concrete, then knight goes back to b6. It's just a pawn up. Probably he has to go for knight e5, but after capturing, after exchanging bishops, he can go b5, because after queen d4 there is queen c7 hitting on f7, and black's not able to play rook f8 because of the bishop. So black could play something like b5, but after queen c7, taking, there is still some complexity in the position. f7 is hit, but maybe black can somehow arrange the counterplay with rook c8, rook c2, hitting the both e2 and a2 pawns. But in the game, queen c3 was played by Magnus, and Giri took on a4 with the knight. Again, if bishop takes, this was not so pleasing to Giri, because maybe knight e5 was somewhat worrying to him, and black would be forced to go c6, which traps this bishop. But still, this could be a good blockade on the queen side. I'm not sure what could happen here. Maybe white could expand on in the center with e4, but it's a game for both sides. But Giri took on a4 with the knight, keeping this bishop solid on c6 and keeping this queen side in general very solid. Queen b3 by Magnus. Now queen d5, offering a trade. For example, if the knight went back to b6, there was an interesting line here. White could have taken on c6 here, and after bc to go knight e5. Now bishop c6 is a threat to double attack those rooks to gain back some material. Black can just capture on d4, and after knight c6, because now the knight was under attack, knight c6, queen d2, attacking the e2 pawn. And after knight e7, white gets back some material, but black is still with the pawn up. And after king h8, black would lose the exchange, but it's still somewhat better for black since he's a pawn up. But also white has some chances, of course, because he might have some pressure along this diagonal. Also, the c7 pawn is a weakness. It's possible for both sides to play for a win here. But instead, Giri plays queen d5 here, which allowed Magnus to take on c6 now. And we have forced sequence of moves, because the knight on a4 is under attack, so queen takes c6 is forced, knight e5, and now queen b5 to keep defending the knight on a4. Queen goes back to c2 naturally, doesn't want to exchange pieces. Now Giri makes a mistake that brings the game into the wrong direction. He plays knight d5 here. Instead, the best move was to go knight b6 and to give up some material back. And in case of bishop b7, to go knight c4. Because the threat was bishop c6. After, let's say, rook b8, he would have bishop c6 and he would take back the material. c7 pawn would be also under some pressure. Knight c4 is a nice way to deal with this. And after bishop a8, to take on a3 first. And here I think white is forced to go queen c6. If he somehow attacks the knight on a3, then rook a8, queen a3, and now queen e2 even. Black is excellent here. Also with g3, without the bishop on g2, white might get under attack with the knight plus queen combo, with some knight e4, knight d2 ideas, getting to f3 finally. So this knight b6 was the best move, but he chose knight d5 here. And now, using this overloaded queen, now white just hunts the queen by rook b1 first. Queen a5 is the only move because there's no other square. And now Magnus took on d5. He's using the fact that the queen is overloaded, so the most logical is to capture with the pawn. But here, let me show you first. Bishop e4 was the better choice. Why is that? Well, the h7 pawn is hit, bishop h7 with knight f7 check. If you provoke g6, then you get a better version of what happened in the game, because g6 is provoked, and with the absence of the dark square bishop, this g6 allows f6 and h6 to be entered by white's pieces. So with this Zwischenzug bishop e4, if you go knight f6 to somehow avoid g6, then white takes on b7. If the rook moves to b8 or d8, there's knight c6. If knight c3 as a counter attack on the rook, then you have rook b3. And after knight b5 to hit the bishop, then you can play first bishop c5, and there are ideas like knight c4, rook b4. Let's say if rook a b8 happens, bishop c6, rook e d8, you don't play knight c4, you play queen b1, which is very nice. And now you combine pinning on the b file, which doesn't allow queen to get to d2 because of a4. Let's say I play some random move like h6, knight c4, queen a4, and I have in the end this very powerful shot. Bishop e4 was slightly more precise, provoking g6, and after taking, bishop b4. Now after, let's say, queen b6, there is bishop c3, and now it's either black giving up the queen by queen b1, taking knight c3, which leads to a very bad position for black, since there are lots of holes in the position. Knight can jump to f6, h6 and create a chaos in the position, or to, after bishop b4, queen b5, to go bishop b1 and then take the queen. But instead in the game what happened was bishop d5, and now e d5 by Giri. But actually it was the best try to go for queen d5. And after taking the knight on a4, to go f6 and maybe to go to d3 with the knight. If you go to f3, then this knight has to reroute one more time, and it's losing precious time. I think knight d3 is better because it can jump to c5 immediately or to f4 to hit e6. e d5 was played. But now after rook b7, it's really a tough position. The knight on a4 and queen on a5 are offside. What can black do if he takes on e5 to just eliminate this annoying knight? Then white takes and the c7 pawn is under attack. So if you go c5, then there's queen f5. After defending the pawn on f7 by rook f8, there's e6. This position looks pretty awful with two pawns down after king h8. You can go rook f7 to stop queen e1, queen f2. And after rook d8, just go rook e7, and after h6 to make some luft for the king, you go queen f7, and after rook g8, queen d5. And this is just two pawns up. The bishop will get out very soon. These pawns are going to be real targets, and it's not realistic to hope that black is going to save this game. But what Giri did was even worse. He played c5, and that allowed queen f5 immediately. Hitting on f7, Giri tried to defend this pawn by rook f8, but now knight f7 by Magnus, and now he tries to get his queen back to the defense, but it was already too late for anything to be done. Also interesting line was queen e1, king g2, queen e2, but still after queen d5 it's really unpleasant for black. So after this he went for queen d8, and now Magnus just simply took on c5, and Giri opted for a queen trade with queen f6. Magnus took, and now knight h6 first to get the knight out, king h8. Also very important is to make the king so passive that it's far from the c-pawn. And now he pushes the pawn, rook fc8, trying to stop the pawn somehow, but there is c7. And you can see that the knight is out of the play. Rook on a8 cannot help so fast to attack the pawn, and also the king is stuck on the 8th rank, so when the rook moves from the 8th rank, there is rook b8. So the position is just hopeless here. Giri tried with knight c3. For example, if he went for king g7, there is knight f5 with knight d6 next, hitting the rook, and after, let's say, king f7, knight d6, king e6, here, he would go to c1, get to f4 to defend this pawn, and his rook would be free to attack other pawns. So after c7, he went for knight c3, and now bishop b2. If the knight moves to, let's say, b5 to attack c7, there's bishop f6 checkmate. So he tried to play d4 to defend this knight, but after knight f7, couple of more moves, he's going to get back some material, king g6, and now king just gets into the game, knight b5, takes, and after a4 he's losing this pawn, but still he's with two pawns up after bishop d4, knight e6, and after bishop e3, Anish Giri resigned in this position because in the next couple of moves, white is going to play rook b6, attacking the knight and the pawn on a6. He's gonna collect one more pawn, and also f6 is criminally bad, so that was enough for him to choose to resign. I hope you enjoyed this game. Thank you so much again for watching. See you soon. Bye.